Mark, are you ready to hit the ground running?
Yeah, I think I'm ready.
Fantastic.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi, nice to see you again, Samantha. Okay, I'll just start to share my screen. Hi, right. Well, just before I begin, I'd like to say thank you to Ernesto for that very interesting introduction, focusing really on the difficulties that EMI students face when engaged on programs at university level. Now, my job here is to introduce you to the book that Ernesto and I have written together. And I think logically, it would be a good place to start by referring to one of my favorite tennis players. Now, bear with me. Now, let me have a look 1 second. I'm afraid I seem to have a technical issue at the moment. Yes, there we are. Okay, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. This saying by Arthur Ashe, tennis player, I think is relevant to the situation of the EMI learner, and is also relevant in many ways to the book that Ernesto and I have produced. Now, start where you are. For the learner, there are many different EMI realities. Not all EMI programs are the same. This varies from discipline to discipline, but also from country to country and institution to institution. There are, for example, enormous differences in contact hours for learners. Some programs will have learners engaged in classroom activities for up to 30 hours a week. Others will be much slimmer than that. So start where you are. So the book that we've written is grounded in different realities and is applicable to all EMI students. Use what you have and do what you can. This picks up the themes of strategy use and awareness, and also of learner responsibility that Ernesto referred to in his talk. Now, the book itself, we believe that there was a gap in the literature for a book that really focused on the learner and helped the learner out in what is a very difficult task. So it is advocacy in the sense of support for the EMI learner. There's a sense also that EAP, the current EAP orthodoxies, are not always appropriate to EMI learner realities. A lot of brilliant work done in EAP, a lot of it highly successful. However, there is a sense that giving learners yet more to study, more classroom time, on top of their disciplinary responsibilities, may not always be as helpful as we imagine. So, what do? We decided to focus on awareness activities for the learner, so the learner can better understand the endeavor they are engaged in. We also decided that it was a good idea to focus on strategy development. Now, when I use the word strategy, I'd like to refer you to Ernesto's talk. So all of the things Ernesto talked about in terms of learner strategies are included in the word strategy that I use when talking about activities in this particular book. The approach we took for the book, which is a series of tasks and strategy exercises, is to demand a good level of challenge. The book is deliberately quite difficult at times. It requires the learners to do a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting, in order to sharpen up their strategies and to increase their awareness. So the degree of difficulty is certainly one of the design criteria in the book. The approach is also to use the language that the learners already have. So to start where they are. The major themes in the book or the themes or strands that run through the exercises that we've designed are those of interaction. Now, interaction peer to peer, that's learner to learner, and also interaction in terms of teacher to learner and learner to teacher. And also, I think it's fair to say that language in many of these exercises is characterized as learner talk and as a sense-making tool. So there is an emphasis here on learners talking to each other and using language in order to understand what they do and do not know. Okay, the book is divided into 4 sections. The introductory section really asks the learner to think about where they are, to situate their EMI subject, to think about what their lessons are like, the kind of language support that's available to them, and really consider the nature of the endeavor that they are engaged in. Then we use the metaphor of flying. So we have around your classes before taking off. This is, I think, very important. We take time to present learners with exercises and activities to help them prepare for classes. Now, Ernesto referred to some research done in Italy, which said students really don't do this. So we're trying to encourage through this section some learner behavior, that they will take time to prep their classes before attending their classes. I'll give you an example of one of those activities a little later. Also, we have a look at some in-flight strategies. That's coping with turbulence, we call it. The classes here, the in-flight classes, so to speak, are either lectures or seminars, or it could be lab sessions and so on. So it's a range of situations there. Then we think about reflecting after landing. So what can learners do after a class in order to make sense of what they have just learned or partially learned? I think this is, again, is a very, very important section in the book. Now then, we're going to have a look at an activity that comes from section 2, which is around your classes before taking off, part of the preparation here. We focus here on academic vocabulary and what learners need to know in order to fully understand. Now, this is an awareness exercise. We're using here Ernesto's visual metaphor of the iceberg. Now, if you just take a moment to have a look at this image, you'll see above the water and below the water. You'll notice that above the water, we have a terrifying term from mathematics, homeomorphism. This is an example of a technical term, okay? And also above the water is the words used in a succinct definition of the concept. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to trouble you with a definition of this. This is purely an example. So this is what is above the water. Below the water, you can see on the right-hand side, below the water, it says the language needed for complete understanding of the concept. Further down on the left, language used in related concepts. Now, the idea here is that learners become more aware of what they need to know in order to know a word, what they need to know in order to fully understand the academic vocabulary or keywords of their discipline. Now, this is grounded in research. As Ernesto pointed out, many learners do have difficulty with some of the key vocabulary in their discipline. The aim, as I say, is to develop the awareness of academic vocabulary. And what do we ask the students to do? Well, in this exercise, we very much ask the students to think. What is it What is a keyword? What exactly is that? We ask them to talk, to discuss with classmates. We ask them to apply this idea by thinking of a keyword from their own discipline and then trying to think of the language that they need to know in order to fully explain that word or understand that word. And then some extension work for them. We use the base corpus, the academic speaking corpus, the British academic speaking corpus, and direct the students to this and ask them to find examples and look at keywords and to work on succinct definitions, to think about what language they need for a more complete understanding of the word. So here, awareness very much is the thing, to allow the students to think carefully about the words they use and the keywords in their discipline so they can use that awareness to more thoughtfully apply their strategies for learning and understanding. Okay. Now, let's move on now to what learners can do during classes. And in this particular exercise that I've chosen from in-class activities, we're going to have a look at the IRF sequence. What's it for, what it does, and how to deal with it. Now, just to remind you, the IRF sequence used in classes is a form of interaction. Now, I in the IRF means initiation. This is usually a teacher question. A teacher will ask a question to a class. The R is the response. The response is an answer to that question given by a student or students. And the F is feedback, sometimes is characterized as follow-up, in which the teacher will respond to the learner's response. So this is the IRF feedback. It's the basic unit of interaction in a classroom. Now, this is a staple of teacher training. It's ubiquitous in all forms of teaching. However, it's usually kind of occult teacher knowledge, something that teachers are trained in, but learners may be unaware of. So making the learner more aware of this form of interaction in a classroom will allow them to participate more freely and more thoughtfully in it. So what do we do? Well, we give the learners some examples of IRF sequences. A very quick one for you would be something like a teacher says, what is the capital of France? That is the I. A student says, Paris. That is the R. And the teacher says, well done, correct. That is the F. Now, that is an example of the most simple IRF sequence. However, IRF sequences can be extended or chained into sequences of questions in which the teacher may shepherd, guide, or scaffold a learner towards a more complex answer to a question. So we give examples of transcripts there for learners to have a look at, to think about, and to develop their understanding of what an IRF sequence may be in a classroom. The thinking and reflecting is very important here. It may be individual, it can be collaborative, working with classmates to think about how this might happen in the learning process. By talking and comparing ideas, we'll come to this a little bit later, but learner talk, a way of sense making, a way of understanding is key to all of these activities. And then extension. The extension work we're doing here with the learners is asking them to think about wait time. The wait time, by the way, is the time between the teacher's I, the question, and the learner response. Typically, it's about 1 to 3 seconds, not long, as you can imagine. So we ask them to think about that and how they can manage that. And then alternatives to the R. Thinking about, we don't just have to work on individual response here. There is scope for pair work, the scope for group work, the scope for interaction in the classroom. In fact, I think it's fair to say that interaction either teacher to learner or interaction learner to learner in pairs and groups is a very, very valuable pedagogic resource in EMI. And I think to encourage pair group work learner talk is a very valuable contribution to the learner's learning resources. And the power of talking, as I mentioned earlier, in the reflecting after landing part of the book, in which learners are trying to make sense of what they've understood. We very much encourage the idea that talking is a way of making sense, that language, if you like, by its very nature, is logical, ordered, and sequential. It's quite possible that what the learners have learned is not ordered and logical and sequential in the mind of the student. The content needs to be organized. And by putting something into language, you do find a natural organization for that. And you also find out what you don't know. You find out what you're unable to talk about. So talking here is a sense-making tool, very important indeed. Now, another theme here is that collaborative sense-making is a very valuable thing for learners to do. That this can either be informal in terms of going to the coffee bar after a lecture or after a class, sitting down with your friends and talking to each other and working out what it is that's just happened to them. You know, what have they learned? You will find that, you know, by talking, it's a very valuable learning thing, because we don't only remember, we're not just information processors. We learn how, we remember how we learned something. We remember who we learned it with. We remember the laughter. We remember the emotional temperature in the room. Talking together, you can help fix learning in a very, very real way. So this informal approach to learning is something that we do value, and the collaborative nature of learning student to student outside of the classroom as well, incredibly valuable. So in the coffee bar. But also we can formalize this way of making sense. There's an example exercise we use called accountable talk. Now, in accountable talk, we ask the learners to focus on logical connections between their propositions, between what they're saying. So we ask them to use words like therefore, so, because, and really focus on those. This gives a discipline to not only the language they use, but also to how they organize their content. Another way of organizing accountable talk is to refer to the thoughts and ideas of others. So according to, now this could be informal in terms of referring to the ideas and thoughts of friends and classmates, or to the academic literature. But either way, it introduces an element of difficulty and challenge into the task, and also maintains the idea of learner talk as sense making. Now, I hope that's given you, 1 second. I hope that's given you a sense of the book that we've written together, and how it can help learners to really engage more carefully and more thoughtfully in their programs. And it is, quite honestly, an attempt to help the learners in what can be an incredibly difficult, daunting and intimidating environment, when there may not be too much help available to them immediately. That their tutors, their content tutors, will not have time to talk to them very much, and there may or may not be language support available in their institution. So we're starting where they are, we're using what they have, and we're helping them to improve, to do what they can. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Mark. the audience got quite active there in the chat. Very inspired by the book and how it can be applied to different levels of study, also studying through their own language. So I think the book will inspire beyond EMI and higher education.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the comments in the chat. Thank you very much.